Hello and welcome to Language Secrets. We're about the hidden links between different languages, focusing on European languages. But today we're doing something a bit more broad, brought about by one of our viewers, Micheli5970.
Yes, because in episode 2, I think it was, we'd been a little bit sweeping in stating that the Spanish word for key is llave or llave with a double L at the start of it. And Micheli pointed out that in one or two instances, the Spanish used the word clave, CL, at the start, as in la palabra clave, the key word, or un elemento clave, a key element. And we had a bit of a nerdy conversation about that backwards and forwards, which was when Micheli...
One of the interesting things that Micheli said was, well, I'm not really a linguist, just a multilingual speaker who's fascinated by this sort of stuff. And that brought about the question to us, well, actually, what is a linguist? What makes us capable of being in the position to make these videos? And so we thought we'd talk about that today.
Yes, by way of introduction, if you like. And I would say, if anybody of the two of us, you're the one with the formal qualification to do this stuff, because you're the one who's got a degree in... What actually is your degree called?
I studied, it's called Modern Languages, 3 languages. So I studied French, Spanish and Italian at university.
And just to spare you false modesty, we might as well say here that you got a first, I think, in all 3 of those across the board.
Correct.
I would say I'm more of your classic amateur linguist. I went to university to do a French degree, but I'd been out of school for some years by that point, and I simply didn't stay the course.
And that was actually in the 1980s, right, where presumably it was pretty difficult to find a course that was focused more on the language structure rather than the literature side of things.
Yes, very much so. And I was always far more comfortable in the language lab than in the library.
Yeah, there is one book, though, this book, The Loom of Language, that you're always banging on about, that we're going to talk about a bit today.
Exactly, and I thought it would be well worth taking a moment just to talk about this remarkable book. The most remarkable book I've ever come across about language and languages. And anybody who's impatient to sort of go further and faster into this whole area than we have done so far in these videos, might as well just save themselves the bother of watching the rest of these and just go out and buy this book.
In fact, you actually love the book so much that you've got 2 copies of it.
Only 2?
Only 2 copies. And the book itself, describes itself as a self-educator for the home student. And what is particularly interesting about it is it very rarely talks about one language at a time. It's either focusing on the main Germanic languages or the main Romance languages and making comparisons between 4 languages or so at a time.
Exactly, and the real meat of the book is, just to sort of pull out a couple of pretty random examples here, tables. There are tables and tables and tables in this book. So, for example, here we've got demonstratives, basically a table of demonstratives. So English, but also Swedish, Danish, Dutch and German. So this in Swedish, Danish, Dutch, German, that, which, so interrelative pronouns, everything tabulated out. Or, for example, Romance adjectives, so good, better, best, the superlatives and all of that. How do they handle that in French? How do they do it in Spanish? The Latin is this, the Italian is that. And then the adverbs, well, better, best, mieux, mejor, all the rest of it. Tabulated out, list after list after list.
Yeah. So you could essentially save yourself the bother of watching these videos and just get yourself a copy of this book, but it's not the most easy read.
Yeah, you would have to admit this is not a coffee table book. This is not a bit of light bedside reading. I think one of the most useful things of all in the book is that the last maybe 20% of the book is what they call a language museum. These are word lists, carefully curated word lists, subject by subject, going through the main nouns, the main verbs and so on, all the auxiliary verbs, firstly in all of the Germanic or the Teutonic languages as they're referred to them here, and then in the main Romance languages. An extraordinarily complete toolkit for anybody who wants to bury themselves away for quite a long time and learn up to 8 languages. But there's also a lot of discussion about Norwegian, Romanian, all sorts of sort of satellite languages.
I actually was using this book. I found it quite useful when I was doing my French and Spanish A levels side by side for going through and learning lists of vocabulary. The only time where it wasn't super useful was that quite a lot of the vocabulary has become a bit outdated now. So I went on my French exchange and was referring to the oven. I can't even remember.
Horse and carriage.
Yes, stuff. That's that sort of thing, using just like sort of super dated World War II-esque vocabulary to describe things within the house, which sort of didn't quite translate across, and there was a barrier there for getting my point across. But that's only a small gripe that I have with the book.
Honestly, just go and buy this book. You won't regret it. I would say that it is, having been exposed to the audacious scope of this book, that made me think this stuff is far more achievable than language teachers seem to assume. This comparing between different languages and drawing conclusions from one language and applying them to another language, contrasting and comparing between them. But if anything, there is a point and a purpose to going through and taking the main meat out of this book and presenting it in a sort of 2020s way, rather than a verbose, bookish 1940s way.
Sure. So next time you come across one of our videos on YouTube, we'll probably be back to more our normal sort of content, which is looking at the links between languages and how to get from one to another. But for now, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching.